I came home from deployment thinking the worst was already behind me. 18 months overseas. Heat that never really left your skin. Orders that didn't care what you missed back home. All I wanted was quiet. My land, my animals, the barn my family had depended on for 40 years. Instead, I pulled into my driveway and stared at an empty concrete slab where my barn used to be. No warning, no explanation, just gone. Rain clouds were rolling in low and heavy, the kind that soak through everything. 20 of my cattle stood out in the open field, shifting nervously, looking at me like they were waiting for instructions I didn't have yet. And that's when it hit me. This wasn't an accident. This wasn't weather damage. Someone made a decision while I was gone. Someone decided my property didn't belong to me anymore. My name is Jake Morrison. Before all of this, my life was simple in the way honest work usually is. Hard, repetitive, but clear. I own a working ranch my family built back in 1983, long before HOAs, long before community standards. My dad and I built that barn together when I was younger. We fixed it after storms, reinforced it when the roof sagged, replaced boards one at a time when money was tight. It wasn't fancy. It didn't match anyone's aesthetic vision. But it worked. And more importantly, it was legal. When I deployed, I didn't vanish. I paid my taxes. I filed the paperwork. Neighbors checked in. Everything was exactly the way it was supposed to be. Apparently that didn't matter. The drive home after deployment is supposed to feel like relief. You picture it for months. The turns in the road you know by muscle memory. The smell of home, the sense that something solid is waiting for you. I remember gripping the steering wheel, already planning my first full day back. Walk the fences, check the herd, patch the north side of the barn roof before storm season hit. Simple things. Grounding things. I rounded the last bend in the driveway, and my brain just stopped. The landscape felt wrong, flat, empty. At first I thought exhaustion had finally caught up with me, that maybe my eyes weren't adjusting. I parked the truck, stepped out, and felt my boots crunch on broken concrete. That sound snapped everything into focus. The barn was gone. Not damaged, not half collapsed. Gone. The foundation was exposed. The walls were reduced to piles of lumber shoved aside like trash. My feed storage area was empty. My vet cabinet was missing. The equipment shed door hung crooked, stripped of anything valuable. And my cattle, they stood there watching me, rain starting to fall, uneasy and confused. I stood there longer than I want to admit. Rain soaked my jacket. My hands started shaking. One of the cows let out a low, restless sound, and that snapped me out of it. You don't get to freeze when animals depend on you. So I moved. I loaded what little I could salvage. I started herding the cattle toward my neighbor Jim's place, praying he'd have room. As soon as Jim stepped outside, I knew. His face told me everything before he said a word. He started apologizing immediately. "They came months ago, Jake," he said. "HOA, heavy equipment, paperwork. The HOA." Even hearing it out loud felt ridiculous. HOAs regulate lawns and mailboxes, paint colors and fences, not agricultural buildings on private ranch land that existed decades before the HOA itself. That night, thunder rolled overhead as my cattle crowded into Jim's already packed barn. I sat in my truck, rain streaking down the windshield, feeling something worse than anger settle into my chest. Helplessness. The next morning, I called law enforcement. I did what you're supposed to do when someone destroys your property. A deputy arrived, walked the slab, took photos. Then he found a notice nailed to a post, sealed in plastic, like someone wanted it to look official. It was signed by Megan Henley, president of the HOA. Immediate safety concerns. The deputy sighed and told me it would likely be a civil matter. HOA claims authority. Civil court. Paperwork. Time. Civil. That word echoed in my head the entire drive to the HOA office. Megan Henley sat behind her desk like she'd been expecting me. Perfect posture, perfect smile, climate-controlled office, not a speck of dust anywhere. She talked about my barn like it was a hazard she'd done me a favor by removing. She used phrases like community welfare and proactive enforcement. When I asked where my equipment was, she avoided eye contact. When I asked what authority she had to demolish a structure built long before her HOA existed, she leaned back and suggested I should adapt to modern standards. That's when something clicked. She didn't think she'd done anything wrong. I walked out of that office shaking with anger. and doubt. Reality closed in fast. Boarding fees, emergency vet visits. One of my older cows cut her leg on debris that never should have been left behind. Every problem cost money. Every solution drained more of what I had. At night alone, I replayed everything. Maybe I should have been here. Maybe the barn really was old. Maybe fighting an HOA was like punching fog. I'd faced danger overseas without hesitation. But this was slow, bureaucratic, smiling people hiding behind policies. I came closer to giving up than I want to admit. Then Jim came over with a manila envelope. Inside were photos from his security cameras, clear shots of demolition crews loading my equipment onto trucks. Not broken, not scrap, carefully handled, strapped down. My feed mixer, my vet cabinet, everything I'd been told was disposed of. Auction receipts followed, dated the week after the demolition. That was the moment the doubt burned away. This wasn't overreach. This wasn't a misunderstanding. This was theft. Something inside me hardened. I stopped reacting and started planning. I buried myself in county record zoning laws, old permits. I learned more about property law in a week than I ever wanted to know. And there it was in black and white. My barn was grandfathered, protected. The HOA had zero authority. Zero. The deeper I dug, the uglier it got. Other properties, other demolitions, always older structures, always the same excuse, always the same signature. Megan Henley. And always the same demolition company, tied directly to her family. That's when I understood this wasn't about safety. It was about control, about money, about reshaping land without consent. By the time I sat across from a lawyer, my voice was steady. She didn't sugarcoat it. What happened was illegal. And if we moved fast, we could stop it. County inspectors got involved. Injunctions were filed. Megan started pushing back harder, louder, more desperate. She even showed up on my property one night with a security guard claiming I was trespassing on my own land. Watching that guard step back when a deputy explained the law was one of the quietest victories I've ever experienced. The HOA meeting was the breaking point. A packed room. Neighbors who trusted her. I didn't yell. I didn't rant. I showed evidence. Photos, videos, contracts. I let the truth speak. When the county official announced their findings, the room went silent. Megan's authority collapsed in real time. No loopholes, no excuses, just consequences. The judge's ruling came later. Clear. Final. The barn would be rebuilt to exact specifications. Damages paid. Authority stripped. Megan Henley didn't look at me when she left the courtroom. She didn't need to. The law had already spoken. Now I stand here watching a new barn rise where the old one stood. Stronger, solid, built not out of revenge but accountability. My cattle walk back inside like nothing ever happened. And in a way, that's the most satisfying ending there is, because this was never about winning. It was about refusing to disappear just because someone thought I wouldn't fight back. Power only survives as long as people believe it can't be challenged.